Are we, Arvin, are we ready with the live streaming?
Yes, sir. It already started streaming.
Okay. I think, Sanjana, you can begin. I request others, except for the anchor and the speaker, to mute themselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Esteemed curator of the Literary Club and the chairperson of today's session, Professor Prashant Sinha, respected speaker Dr. Vijay Madge, members of the Literary Club, and dear attendees. I welcome you all to the 55th session of the Literary Club in association with the ELTAI Pune chapter, the Alumni Association of the Department of English and CLS, Saurashtra University, Rajkot, and the School of Humanities, MIT ADT University, Pune. Let me quickly take you through the structure of the session. We'll begin with a talk by our distinguished speaker who will speak on the topic Eliot and Aristotle. Then we will have a short Q&A interaction following that. Later, the closing thoughts will be given by our chairperson, followed by a quick update about the next session. Let me take a minute to introduce our speaker to you all now. I now invite Professor Vijay Madge, a former professor of English literature from AM College, University of Pune, whose doctoral work is on T.S. Eliot, The Knight and the Saint. We have also had the privilege of attending a 5-day workshop on the wasteland by Professor Madge at the Literary Club in the previous time. During our national webinar that took place earlier this year, he chaired the Literary Theory and Criticism panel and was the speaker for the poetry panel where he elaborated on language in poetry. He has multiple eclectic publications in both creative writing and critical writing. To mention a few, Academiad, a satirical poem on Indian academics, a new edition taken out recently with the addition of a few more poems. Once Upon a Time, a novel, and Dreams and Desires, second volume of verse. Further, along with research papers in various journals, Sir edited a couple of books on literary criticism and theory and one on Vijay Tendulkar's plays. In fact, Sir has received a special honor of being invited by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II to participate in the bicentenary celebrations of Dickens' birth at the Buckingham Palace. We're also privileged to have Professor Prashant Sinha, who will be chairing today's session. Professor Sinha was the former head Department of English, Pune University, and has teaching experience of over 50 years. He's also the curator of the Literary Club and a mentor to us all. I warmly welcome you too, sir. Now, the moment we've all gathered here for. Both Aristotle and Eliot have interesting thoughts on poets and their qualities. I'm certain we're all waiting to see the interesting linkage between these two critics that Dr. Madge will be presenting today. I now hand over the stage to our speaker, as everyone is really excited to hear from him. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Namaste and good evening to you all. Now, at the outset, I should like to ask you to take a very uh, long look at the title of the talk, Eliot and Aristotle. It's not Eliot on Aristotle. Such a misunderstanding is likely to arise because Eliot has said a few things about Aristotle. And so you might feel that I'm going to say something about Eliot's comments on Aristotle. It's not so. I'm going to stick to my subject, Eliot and Aristotle, meaning thereby I want to show some similarity between Eliot's celebrated impersonality theory and some comments that Aristotle made, which I happened to find just by accident. Now, you will remember perhaps that in the Golden Session, in our Golden Jubilee session, I had spoken about, or at least hinted at, some resemblance between Eliot's impersonality theory and the philosopher the philosopher Plato. I should like to go over it for a while, just touch upon it. Now, in his dialogue, Eon, this Plato asks and answers the question as to how Homer, a born blind poet, who does not see the world, who cannot see the world, can still talk about the world in such memorable terms. And in order to explain this mystery, he says, that is, Plato says, that we must learn to separate Homer the man from Homer the poet. And you will easily recall the famous phrase that Eliot himself uses in Tradition and the Individual Talent: the man who suffers and the mind that creates. So far, meaning you will find that Plato tries to answer that mystery by saying that when Homer composes his poems, he is not the same Homer that we know. Some divine spirit enters into his soul, into his mind, and he is filled with divine frenzy, and his poetry is the result of that. So for him, poetry was something that is something like an inexplicable mystery. Now, that this poetry was similarly intractable to even Eliot is seen by some of the phrases that he uses for the poetic process. In Tradition and the Individual Talent, he says that poetry or the poetic process is something like waiting, passive attending upon the event. Now, this is a phrase that Eliot steals. He, being a mature poet, he steals from the 16th century Spanish mystic, St. John of the Cross, who in his famous book, The Dark Night of the Soul, says that the moment when you see God, this mystical moment, is something that defies all rationality. You cannot force it into existence. It comes when it comes. That it comes is absolutely certain, but when, nobody knows. Now, Eliot borrows that phrase or steals that phrase, as I said, from St. John of the Cross and applies it to the artistic process. He says, like the mystical moment, the artistic moment also cannot be forced into existence. It's only passive attending upon the event. The artistic moment will come when it will come. You can't say that I will write a sonnet at 8 o'clock at night, meaning that activity is not so mechanical or robotic. Now, this passive attending upon the event, one has to wait for it. It's as if Eliot is saying, those also write who only stand and wait, or those only write who stand and wait. Now, there are some other phrases also that Eliot uses for the poetic process. For instance, in his introduction to Harold Munro's poems, he says the poetic process is something like a dark embryo. Or talking about the automatic writing, Eliot says that what we call automatic writing actually has gone through a long period of incubation. But he also says that until the shell breaks, we don't know what kind of egg we have been sitting upon. So, like Plato, Eliot also feels that poetry is something mysterious, but but there is a big difference in their interest at least. Plato stops at divine frenzy, but Eliot goes on to make further distinctions between the qualitative difference in that divine frenzy and in the maturity of the poets. In the tradition and individual talent, he has something interesting to say about the mature and immature poets. Can we have the slide, please, so that people can?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Yes. Now, there he says, the mind of the mature poet differs from that of the immature one, not precisely in any valuation of personality, not being necessarily more interesting or having more to say, but rather by being a more finely perfected medium in which spatial or very varied feelings are at liberty to enter into new combinations. So it's at this point that what Aristotle says in the second paragraph of 17th chapter of his Poetics becomes very interesting and relevant. And I happen to uh, set my eyes on that passage just by accident, just by chance. It so happened that when I started teaching Aristotle's Poetics, one evening at home, I I was just preparing for my next lecture on poetics, and I opened the book, and lo and behold, my eyes, the book opened exactly at chapter 17, and the second paragraph somehow attracted my attention. As I started reading, I became all the more interesting, and perhaps this whole talk, this whole paper was there in my mind in an embryonic form uh, at that time itself. Now, this passage has been variously translated. Let us see, let us have the next slide, please. Yes. Now, I give you here the translations, various translations of that second paragraph of the 17th chapter. The first one is by Butcher, second is by Dosh, and the last one, that is the third one, is the one that I happen to be using at that time. Now, I go to the first and the third one. Butcher says, again, the poet should work out his play to the best of his power with appropriate gestures. For those who feel emotions are most convincing through natural sympathy with characters that they represent. And one who is agitated storms, one who is angry raises with the most lifelike reality. And then the controversial statement comes here. Hence, poetry implies either a happy gift of nature or a strain of madness. In the one case, a man can take the mold of any character, and in the other, he is lifted out of his proper self. Dorsey's translation is also roughly the same, so I omit that. And let us come to the third one, Golden, that is Leon Golden's. No, not the slide. Let us go back to, yes, the third translation, Golden's translation. As much as possible, the poet should work out action with gestures. For given the poets of the same natural abilities, those are most persuasive who are involved with emotions they imitate. For example, one who is distressed conveys distress, and one who is enraged conveys anger most truly. Therefore, and pay a very close look to the translation now. Therefore, the art of poetry is more a matter for the well endowed poet rather than for the frenzied one. For the poets marked by the former characteristic can easily change character, whereas those of the latter type are possessed. We'll come back to Golden's translation and especially the sentence later on, but let us analyze this second para. Now, the first part of the passage seems very simple, straightforward, almost unproblematic. Because from what he says, it might appear that Aristotle is issuing instructions to actors or talking about the gestures and the actions of the actors. And it might appear to some of you that he is talking about the sixth part of the tragedy, that is spectacle or opsis. Now, you know, Aristotle has, according to him, tragedy has six parts: plot, character, thought, diction, melody, and spectacle. Or to use the Greek names, mythos, ethos, dianoia, lexis, melos, and opsis. Now, actually, these comments, the opening sentence, doesn't belong to opsis or to spectacle. Actually, this 17th chapter is a chapter that generally we don't do. You see, those of you who are familiar with teaching poetics will know that we start from chapter 1, go to chapter 15 straight. And then from 16 to 21, these are the chapters we omit because they deal with Greek language, syntax, rhythm, and meter, etc. So they are not directly relevant to our purpose. And then from chapter 22 to 26, we go straight where he talks about epic and tragedy. Now, as I said, the first sentence might might make you feel that Aristotle is talking about spectacle, but actually he's not. He's continuing the discussion that he had started with chapter 15 and 16. That is the second part of the tragedy, character and characterization. Now, here, I should like to request you to as far as possible, use the Greek names, especially in the case of character. The Greek name is ethos, which we generally translate as character. Now, in English, as we know, the word character is used in many senses. For instance, I can outline those sentences or enumerate those sentences one by one. First, we say Shylock is a character in Merchant of Venice. Second, we say, as far as I know, this person has a strong moral character. And third, we say, she is quite a character. These are three different senses in which we use the word character in English. Now, I am stressing this point because in chapter 6, Aristotle makes a statement which many of you might have found confusing. And the translations also are still more confusing, or they don't explain that sentence. Aristotle says in chapter 6, there can be a tragedy without character but not without plot. And most of us feel dumbfounded. How is it possible? Now, in original Greek, there are two separate words for that. When uh, Shylock is a character in The Merchant of Venice. In that sense, when we use the term character, in Greek for that, the word is preton, that is Preton, preton. That means the agent of action. The better translation is agent of action. And what we mean by the man as a strong moral character, that means ethos. So when Aristotle says that there can be a tragedy without character, he doesn't mean there can be a tragedy without preton. That's just not possible. What he means is these preton or these agents of action can be characterless. The characters can be characterless. Now perhaps you understand that. That's why it's better to use to know the original Greek names. It's ethos, and ethos means that. Now, characterization for Aristotle simply meant once you choose the agents of action, you have to assign to them moral characteristics or moral qualities. For instance, if the agent of action is a young man, naturally his characteristics would be something like energetic, hot-blooded, ambitious, etc. If the agent of action is an old man, naturally physically invalid, slow, phlegmatic, and rather sad, melancholy. So these will be the characteristics. Now, characterization simply means attributing moral qualities to the agents of action. Once that is done, the next step for the poet is to give him right gestures and actions. Aristotle says the poet must mimic appropriate actions and speeches for those agents of action. Once that is done, then the characters will become convincing, because when the audience sees those characters in action, the audience will feel that yes, this character really feels the emotion that he is portraying. And when that happens, the character becomes a convincing character. And that is the job of a poet. The main task of the poet is to create convincing characters. Now, the use of the word mimic, that the writer should mimic out these things, that is very much interesting. But before that, let me tell you that what Aristotle says is echoed by Horace also in Ars Poetica. In that famous sentence, Horace tells the poets, if you wish me to weep, you must weep yourself first. Then and then alone will your misfortunes move me. Now, let us come back to the word mimic. Mimicry, or the poet should mimic the actions and speeches of the characters. It refers to an ancient tradition in Greece, especially in the domain of the orators and actors. In the Republic, Plato says that mimicking involves bending one's soul and conforming it to the soul of another character. So, mimicry is essentially a matter of training for the soul. Naturally, if you mimic a good person, Plato says, your soul will be trained in virtue and goodness. Similarly, if you mimic an evil person, you will be training your soul in sin and wickedness. That is why Plato explicitly prohibits mimicking certain characters. And those characters are a cantankerous woman, or a man and a woman abusing gods. Such persons should not be imitated or mimicked at all. That is what Plato says. But what Aristotle says is, Aristotle doesn't have these apprehensions about the deleterious effects of tragic imitation. For him, it was simply a matter of characterization. That is, if the writer's job is to create convincing characters, then all that he has to do is to bend his soul and conform it to the soul of another character for some time, and then pass on to the next character. So he goes from character to character. That is simply Aristotle's, uh, shall we say, advice to the poets on characterization. Now, in talking about his theory of characterization, Aristotle makes a statement, the second sentence of the passage, that has vexed and perplexed all people throughout history. Let us read the second sentence from Butcher's translation, the first one. Hence, poetry implies either a happy gift of nature or a strain of madness. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. Shall we go to the next slide, please? Yes. This time, I have taken the translation, another standard translation by Ingram Bywater. The speciality of this translation is it's very verbatim. It follows the manuscript tradition of ancient Greece. So it's a very literal translation. Let us see what he has to say here, how he translates that sentence. Hence it is that poetry demands a man with a special gift for it, or else one with a touch of madness in him. So whether it is Butcher, Dosh, or Bywater, they mean the poet is either a genius or a madman. Now, this is slightly controversial because if this is what Aristotle says, then it appears that Aristotle is, after all, at the end of the day, Aristotle is making a bow to the divine frenzy of Plato. And naturally, if that is so, then that upsets the neat apple cart of classicism and romanticism. The inspirationalists have naturally gloated over this remark or over this possibility. And equally unsurprisingly, formalists have been uneasy about it. For instance, Horace says that mere inspiration or genius is an adequate substitute for discipline and training in a poet. But throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the inspirational view was very much in favor. And uh, the best expression of this is Milton's invocation in Paradise Lost. Perhaps you remember how he uh, invokes the heavenly muse and to sing of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree. And he further implores her, what in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support. That to the height of this great argument, I may assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. So this is very much the inspirational view. Now the trouble with this interpretation or this translation is there are two red flags. Number one, neither here nor anywhere else in poetics does Aristotle say that the poet is in a state of madness when he composes his poems. And the second red flag is, once again, nowhere in poetics does Aristotle make poetry a matter either of inspiration or of perspiration. Now, in the Renaissance, there was an Italian commentator and translator of Aristotle by the name Lodovico Castelvetto. Now, he suggested an emendation to this sentence. He changed the sentence in this way. He says, poetry has its source more in the men, specially gifted, rather than those who are mad. Now, Castelvetto had no textual evidence for making such an emendation. Still, he made it, arguing that Aristotle, the arch formalist, would not have championed the cause of divine frenzy. But as later research has found out, in fact, Castelvetto's emendation has the support from an unexpected corner, that is, an Arabic translation of poetics. Let me tell you. Yeah. Yes, one Arabic translation and also a 15th century manuscript, a 15th century Greek manuscript known as Ricardianus 46. And naturally, when this support was found, neoclassicists like Dryden in England and Rapin in France welcomed such a support. Now, Castelvetto's emendation and therefore Golden Star, which is followed by Golden in his translation. If you take a look at what Castelvetto says, poetry has its source more in the main spatially gifted rather than those who are mad. If you go back to Golden's translation, Golden also makes a similar translation that poetry is a matter more for the well-endowed poet rather than the frenzied one. Now, you will find whether it is the emendation or Golden's translation, both make for a more plausible reading and they have the added advantage of avoiding the either or binary set up mostly by the traditional translations of Butcher, Bywater, and Dosh. And anyway, logically speaking, to say that uh, a poet is either a genius or a madman is not perhaps one of the best possible of expressions because it fails to make any logical, coherent sense. And you will find Aristotle was not very much concerned with the source of poetry like Plato was. You see, Plato was concerned with the source of poetry and its consequences for philosophy, but Aristotle was not. In fact, it appears as if Aristotle is saying to his teacher, my dear sir, for good or ill, poetry exists in the world, and as such, it forms a natural subject for my studies. And all that I'm doing in my poetics is to suggest to poets what is likely to harm or to help or hinder them in the execution of their main task, that of creating uh, convincing characters. Now, at this point, it's also interesting to see the original Greek word that Aristotle uses for the frenzied poet. And here I must express my uh, indebtedness to one of my erstwhile colleagues. You know, I should like to tell you a small anecdote. I was in Gulbarga University for a while, and there one of my colleagues was Dr. Vijay. Now, the unique thing about her was that she knew Greek, which she had learned at Athens, where she was for 2 years in connection with her doctoral work on Homer's Iliad and Valmiki's Ramayana. Now, maybe because we were namesakes and also because of our mutual mentor, Dr. Malgi, we struck immediate friendship. Now, while in Gulbarga, I was homeless like a gypsy scholar and used to stay in the university guest house. And she also used to stay in the staff quarters nearby. And on Sunday evening mornings, she would invariably invite me for a late breakfast. Now, one such Sunday morning, as we were feasting on idlis and the upama, which they call uppitu in Karnataka, I requested her to read out Aristotle's definition of tragedy from chapter 6. And she immediately obliged, bringing a copy of Poetics. She read out from the original text. And then I don't know why, but I felt I should also ask her to read out that passage, second paragraph of the 17th chapter. And I requested her. And she narrowed her eyes and looked at me and said, why do you want to know this? We don't do this chapter, you know. I said, yes, I know we don't do these chapters generally, but just read out the passage for me. I'll tell you later on. Just read out the thing. And she read out. And as she finished reading the passage, one word somehow caught my attention. And that word was maniku, something like maniku. And I asked her, what is that maniku? And she said, that means a maniac poet. It's from the Greek original the Greek word for that manikos. So can you have that slide? Next slide, please. Yes, manikos. So that's the word, and from that you get manikos is mania, and maniku, a maniac, a maniac person. And the moment she said this, the whole paper that I'm talking now flashed before my eyes like daffodils. And um, I literally jumped up from the chair because that was a eureka moment for me. And fortunately for the world, I was not in a bathtub and I was well dressed like a gentleman. And she suddenly asked, "What has happened?" And she said, look. I said, "Sit down, lady. I'll tell you. Uh, I shall tell you all. I shall tell you all," I said. And thus she unwittingly became the first victim of my long torture called Eliot and Aristotle. Now, I told her, look, for Aristotle as well as for modern psychology, the salient feature of mania is its fixedness and rigidity. Mania is some kind of fixation, and a maniac person has his psyche locked up, as it were, in the ice block of a single position from which no change is possible. So, a maniac poet, lost in his own emotional configuration, cannot bend and conform his soul to that of the other character or other person unless it happens to be a photocopy of his own self. And as opposed to that, the well endowed poet can go from character to character. Now, that's why once again you will find how Castleware's emendation and Golden's translation make for a better reading of the text. Now, if you are on board with me so far, then the last line of the passage opens up quite interesting new possibilities, new interconnections. And one such interconnection that immediately springs to my mind is the famous letter of John Keats, which he wrote to his friend, Mr. Richard Woodhouse. The letter is dated October 27, 1818. Can we have that letter, please? The next slide, please. Yes. And now, in that letter, Keats answers the question that Mr. Woodhouse had asked about the nature of the poetical character. And what Keats says about it is quite interesting. Let us go to the underlined line. First, as to the poetical character itself, I mean that sort of which, if I am anything, I am a member. That sort distinguished from the Wordsworthian or the egotistical sublime, which is a thing per se and stands alone. Now, let us pause here for a while. Wordsworthian or the egotistical sublime. And why does he use the word egotistical sublime? Most of you might know that it is often said that the real subject of Wordsworth's poems is really he himself. his own mind. Let him be writing about the daffodils, the solitary reaper, Michael, ruined cottage, whatever, Tintern Abbey. More often than not, the real subject of his poem is himself. I watched and I gazed and gazed, but little thought what show to me, what will to me the show had brought, like that. Whatever the theme the maiden sang, as if her song could have no ending. I listened motionless and still then as I mounted up the hill. So he is talking about himself. He is egotistical, sublime. Now, let us continue with the thing, which is a thing per se and stands alone. So, what he says next is not about the Wordsworthian type. Uh, the poetical character, he says, it's not itself. Now, you will be very much interested in what he says because it reminds you of Eliot. It is not itself, it has no self. It is everything and nothing. It has no character. It enjoys light and shade. It lives in gusto, be it foul or fair, high or low, rich or poor, mean or elevated. It has as much delight in convincing an Iago as an Imogen. What shocks the virtuous philosopher delights the chameleon poet. So you get there. This is almost Eliot's impersonality theory. Yeah. So the mention of Imogen and Iago should alert you that the other type that Keats has in mind is the Shakespearean type. As opposed to Wordsworth, the egotistical sublime, take the Shakespearean type that moves from character to character. One moment it's Imogen, next moment is Iago, Shylock, Antonio. Simply look at the wealth, immense wealth of Shakespeare's character. The character gallery is so immense. It's almost a cosmos, meaning we do say that Shakespeare's mind is cosmic. Aurobindo calls Shakespeare's mind Hiranyagalpa, the golden egg that contains the microcosm as well as the macrocosm and all that. So, Shakespearean type and the Wordsworthian type. And then let us come to the next, the chameleon poet. And now let us come to the next sentence. A poet is the most unpoetical of anything in existence because he has no identity. You remember Eliot? Yeah. Because he has no identity. He is continually in for and feeling some other body, bending one soul and conforming to the other. The sun, the moon, the sea, the men, women who are creatures of impulse are all poetical. Why? Because they have about them an unchangeable attribute. But the poet has none, no identity. He is certainly the most unpoetical of all God's creatures because he has no identity. So, you can see fringed poet, well-endowed poet, egotistical sublime, and the chameleon poet. And now let us look at what Eliot says about the mature poet and the immature poet. Can we go back to that first thing, the Eliot's, the first one? Yes, the mind of the mature poet differs from that of the immature, not in any valuation of personality, but rather by being a more finely perfected medium in which spatial or very varied feelings are at liberty to enter into new combinations. So, Eliot uses the familiar academic jargon, whereas Keats uses a more poetical language, and Aristotle uses almost makes a casual comment, off the cuff comment, as it were. But all of them roughly talk about the same thing. The conceptual congruity among all these, among Aristotle, Keats, and Eliot, is so striking, so unmistakable, that it can only be represented in the following way. Let us have the last slide now. Yes, you can see this. Aristotle, fringed poet, well endowed poet. Keats, egotistical sublime and chameleon poet. Immature poet and mature poet. That is meaning the similarities is so unmistakable. You can't fail to notice it. So that is where I rest my case, and I should like to end by complimenting you all on uh, your extraordinary and exceptional forbearance and fortitude in braving up to this hour-long torture of mine called Eliot and Aristotle. So thank you very much. That's all that I had to say.
Not at all, sir. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. That was an enlightening talk indeed. I'm sure we all learned a lot of new things today. And I'm sure our audience mind must be bursting with new perspectives and questions. So, shall we begin with the Q&A session now? Please raise your hands and I can call out the participants and we can unmute yourself and interact with our speaker now. Yes, Pat, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madge sir. It's not at all a torture. Of course, it opened up so many new avenues for us to think. Firstly, for me personally, it led me to think of how different versions of translations
Yes,
of these classics,
yes,
can be a matter of research itself. So if
yes,
you compare, let us say,
yeah,
the whole tradition of translation of Aristotle's Poetics, that
yes.
itself becomes, for
A
the
matter of,
research scholars who are present here, and
yes,
of course for faculties, that itself becomes an interesting area for research.
yes.
Um,
You see, I must thank my my teacher, Professor B.N. Kulkarni, who taught Aristotle for 2 decades at the university department. He
okay.
was something like a mentor to me. And when I started teaching Aristotle in my college, he suggested to me that I should use Golden's translation.
Mm,
I was following the usual traditional thing, butcher, buy water, and those things. He said Golden is better. And now I realize why he said so. And there are many other
right.
occasions also, Golden, meaning Golden's interpretation of catharsis and three unities, and the one that I talked about, a tragedy can be without character but not without God, many other things. At various places, as I taught Aristotle through Golden's translation, I knew why he said so. It is such a better translation.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Uh, even okay, somebody has unmuted.
Yeah, I am. I have.
I was also because you mentioned Shakespeare,
Mm,
Madge sir,
mhm,
and because you were talking about a man specially gifted versus a man with madness.
mm.
I was reminded of Hamlet's famous dialogue.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
while you were speaking, I just glanced through the second act, second scene of Hamlet.
Mhm.
You see, you have interesting resemblances there as well, sir.
Yes.
When Polonius says, "Though this be madness,
Method.
yet there is method in it," The
Yes.
lines that immediately follow read as, he says, how pregnant sometimes his replies are. If we
Yes.
replace this his with the poet,
Yeah.
how pregnant sometimes his replies are, a
Yes.
happiness that madness often hits on,
Yes.
which reason and sanity could
Mm.
not so prosperously be delivered of.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't the poet's madness also such a kind of madness?
Yeah. No, it's a very popular. It's a popular belief that
Yeah,
madness and genius are indistinguishable. It
true.
there is a very thin line of demarcation between madness and. But in literary criticism, when we discuss poetry, you can't say a poet is either mad. I mean, it's not a matter of either or.
True.
Golden makes it both. Poetry is more a matter for the for a well-trained poet. Mere inspiration is not enough. So it's not either or. It's meaning, and to say, to make a statement, a poet is either a madman or to say, not only a poet, about anyone.
Right.
You can call him a papu, you can call him a genius, that is not expressing any coherent meaning. It only shows your own confusion. You don't know whether he's a genius or a madman.
But how dexterously, Shakespeare enters this entire
Yeah,
discourse. I mean,
yeah,
through these lines of Polonius, that is
yeah,
what
yeah, 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 yeah. That is so.
Aurobindo was so right in calling him the golden egg.
Yes, yes, yes. Even Nagalba.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Pat sir. Mr. Upaluri, please unmute yourself.
Namaste, Vijay ji.
Yes,
I think I am the oldest student, I think, here.
Oh no, not a student.
and of course, I want to be a lifelong learner, especially when there are teachers like you. That is no torment at all. It is, in fact, Shantihi, 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 how Eliot says in his wasteland.
Yes.
In fact, that is not a wasteland to me, it is a taste land where you can taste everything.
Yes.
and also, you see here, age advances, but yet people with positive spirit, they take it very positively, because whatever has to come to us, we have to accept it, because life is full of light and shadow. Right, sir? So, but I feel that if there are opportunities like this, for me to be in the classroom of genius teachers like you, I am ever willing to learn that.
Goodness.
And today it struck me, sir, just like a flash. If you take the name of Aristotle, it contains Eliot plus arts. Eliot plus arts. If you take the letters. So after all, art is art of poetry, art of drama and all that. So like that Hiranyagarbha, already in the egg of Aristotle, Eliot was born at that time.
Yeah.
So Eliot has given us the heritage of the arts right from the Aristotle's times. So it is just in a funny or witty way, just I wanted to say that. And I thank all the organizers and all that. Here in Hyderabad, from the Lampshade Poetry group, I came to know about this meeting. And in spite of my heavy schedule, I said I would like to attend this program. Thank you everyone. My salutations to each and everyone.
Thank you so much, sir, for being there all the way from Hyderabad. It means a lot to us.
Yes, certainly. Good. We are your blessings.
Thank you so much, sir. Samyukta ma'am, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, sir. Good evening. I'm a master student from MIT ADT.
Yes.
As I'm exploring poetry right now, I had a question against it, that if the poet must efface the self, as Eliot says, how can poetry still remain a truthful expression of the human experience?
Why? Why not? Why not? You see, if you are invest in your own personality if you don't go out?
Hmm.
How can you write about the world and life?
Right.
Yeah, you'll end up with your own feelings, and that becomes boring for readers also. Now, how long
Right.
should they listen to you?
Hmm.
Mm,
Thank you, sir.
thank.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Uh, Dr.
Yes,
Madge,
sir. Yes, sir.
I have a small question.
Mm,
It's more like something you need to explain, and
mm.
it's slightly outside the range of your, um, your uh, discussion.
Yeah.
How does Eliot's idea of emotion
Mm,
rhyme with Aristotle's idea of catharsis? You might like to explain that. And I was a little confused
mm,
when Eliot, in Tradition and the Individual Talent,
mm,
talked about the difference between feeling and emotions. How does
mm.
he differentiate feeling from emotion?
Yes, yes. That that is he doesn't explain it there, but emotion, he would call it a more controlling factor, and feelings are the incidental things.
I see.
For instance, in Ode to Night, while talking about Ode to Nightingale, he says Nightingale is the emotion, and all other things are associated with the nightingale.
Yeah, yeah,
These are the feelings, and emotion is an assemblage of feeling. Meaning,
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah,
talks of the art emotion,
yeah, yeah.
he talks of the structural emotion, but feelings are generally the uh, associated thoughts around a feeling that sorry around an emotion. So that's a bit easy thing, like uh, Kolu is talking about fancy imagination. People often ask me what's the difference between fancy and imagination according to Coleridge. I think the best way is to ask Coleridge himself. It's so abstract. Il- This is also a similar, but in talking about Ode to Nightingale alone, he makes that explanation that the uh, things associated with the nightingale and what the poet feels about the nightingale. These are the feelings. The nightingale itself remains the art emotion, the unifying factor of all feelings. So one can say this: emotion is the unifying factor of the feelings, and feelings remain disparate. That would be. And about catharsis,
Yeah.
I think you mentioned, about catharsis, there are, as of course, I, uh, there are two or three theories. One is, of course, we know the purgation theory, the purification theory, that we are um, familiar with. But Golden has quite a revolutionary theory, as you know from the translation itself. And his argument also is quite plausible. It sounds very persuasive. He says, nowhere does Aristotle talk about the psychology of the audience. That is not his concern. His concern is mainly the technique of poetry. So he doesn't talk about the psychology of the audience. So in one sentence, Golden, in a sense, uh, squashes both the purgation theory and the purification theory. He has his own theory, clarification. So he means catharsis, but catharsis of what? The standard translation say catharsis of pity and feeling, or the emotions, catharsis of emotions. But Golden says it's the catharsis of incidents. The incidents are portrayed in such a way that they become universal. So pity and fear regarding those pitiable, fearful incidents no longer look pitiable and fearful. So, meaning that will that requires, uh, another paper on it. Meaning the whole thing is so complex. So it needs a very, meaning Golden's clarification theory, what he calls it, clarification theory. And that sounds very plausible, but I'll tell you why. One sentence. In the opening sentence of sixth chapter, Aristotle says that let us form the definition of tragedy based upon what we have said so far. Now, if that is so, what in the first five chapters, Aristotle doesn't talk about the psychology of the audience at all. He only talks of imitation, talks of three unities in the fifth chapter, the epic and tragedy difference. That's all. Nowhere does he talk about pity and fear in the first five chapters. And from that, Golden argues that it would be a grave logical error for Aristotle to introduce catharsis in the definition. So that's not possible. After all, Aristotle is the father of logic, so he would not be making such an elementary mistake to include in definition what has not appeared before. So, but to explain the clarification theory, as I said, that will require another talk altogether. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions, Sanjana?
I don't think so. If anyone has any other questions, please raise your hands.
Yeah.
Okay then.
Yeah. In that case, we can request Professor Sinha for his remarks in continuum.
Yes.
Dr. Madge and other friends, I must begin by saying that Dr. Madge's talk uh, made me realize how little I know, made me conscious of my profound ignorance of many areas. He showed a remarkable knowledge of Greek theory and referred to the original Greek expression. Again, he showed a wide knowledge of Christian theology, including people like St. John of the Cross, and then, of course, a profound knowledge of the text of Aristotle. Eliot, in a sense, remained in the background because Aristotle became the foreground, partly because most of us try to focus on Aristotle. So Eliot is, on the whole, I should say, slightly clearer than Aristotle. That's the way I'll put it. See, partly because we don't really have the knowledge of Greek that Dr. Madge's talk showed, whereas in Eliot, we don't need that knowledge. Of course, there is no doubt whatsoever that Eliot was profoundly learned and, in a sense, a combination, shall we say, of Horace and Longinus. Longinus is someone we could not bring here, see, because that will again require a separate talk whatsoever. But in a sense, Horace and Longinus represent two poles, shall I say, of classical theory. Horace's idea of uh, uh, pleasure and pleasure and utility, and Longinus' idea of poetry being an expression of a noble soul, are not really in harmony with each other. But then, as we know, in literature, we have to learn to live with contradictions. learn to live with what is not in accord with our own ideas. So Dr. Markey gave us profound insight, I must say, into the topic, and his knowledge of Greek really surprised me. I
Yeah,
didn't know that he had
that
this knowledge of
yeah, accident. Vijay
Aristotle,
Buttal is the, yes.
Greek, and I also did not know that he could cover so much in a span of uh, 60 minutes. See, he began with Aristotle, uh, came to uh, Western theology, referred to uh, Plato, then he talked about English Romantic tradition, and even uh, uh, the late Romantics. Perhaps we might at some stage think about Lord Byron as the romantic who
Yeah,
stood out because he also had the egotistic sublime. In fact, I should say more pronounced
yeah,
than Wordsworth.
yes,
When I was doing my PhD at the University of Iowa, I took a course in romanticism.
mm,
And the trend there was to focus on one or two writers. The
yeah,
writer focused on Wordsworth and Byron. And
yes,
I was wondering what brought them together. The answer he gave was they're concerned with the self. But
yes.
Dr. Madge still covered a lot and covered it very, very aptly, succinctly. I, I am profoundly enlightened by his talk,
Oh, good.
Dr. Madge.
It's all good
Thank you all.
teachers. It's mainly because of good teachers like you, Dr. Sinam. B.N. Kulkarni, Nagarajan, because of you, I am what I am.
Yes, thank you so much, Sinha sir, Madge sir. And now that we're coming towards the end of our session, I hope you all had a great time and you're all excited for our future events too. So before we all leave, I have two announcements. Sorry, two things I'd like to say. Please find the link to the feedback form in the chat box. And I'd also like to hand over the session to Mr. Pat sir, so he can brief us about the upcoming events for the Literary Club. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Sanjana. Please accept our gratitude for joining us from such far nooks and corners.
Mm,
We are highly grateful and glad that we are, expanding, extending beyond the boundaries of Gujarat and Maharashtra. Uh, Even in today's session, we have so many attendees who are outside Gujarat or Maharashtra. So we are very happy for this. Um, Now, for the upcoming month, we have Dr. Madge's workshop on the basics of poetry. That
yes,
proposal is there already with us,
mm,
which is something we are definitely planning to have either in January or in February, whenever it suits the speaker and to the audience. But the workshop will have to be because it will take its own time. So we
mm.
are planning to have it in a series or maybe in 3 to 4 days,
Yes,
like we
like
had the Wasteland workshop.
yes, yes.
So maybe 60 minutes or 90 minutes every day, like that,
Mm,
for
mm,
3 to 4 days. And
yes.
that is how we are planning it. So let us see how the dates suit everyone.
Yeah.
Secondly, we are also open for proposals for delivering a talk during the upcoming months, that is February, March, and also I think April.
Mm,
So please do not hesitate in writing to us through the Literary Club email, that is the Literary Club 2018@gmail.com, if you are interested in delivering a talk in the Literary Club meeting. Third thing, Dr. Marge has also sent us the crux of this talk for our blog, the Literary Club blog, which will soon be uploaded, and the link will be shared with all those who fill up the feedback link. and of course, all those who are there in the Literary Club WhatsApp group. So please do stay connected to us through the Literary Club WhatsApp group. Please fill up the feedback link so that we can share the updates with you. And as soon as the dates of the poetry workshop are finalized, we will let you know. Also, we will consider the proposals that come for the future lectures, for the future talks. And hopefully, we will have newer speakers from relatively newer corners of the country in the upcoming session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Can we all turn on our cameras for a minute? We'd all like to take a nice group picture.
Okay.
Okay. I think you've gotten the picture. I hope so.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much, everyone. Thank you again, Madge sir.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
thank you.
sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. See you all in the next session.
Yeah, see you.